The video today is about the first part of Job. For people who are well versed in the Bible, they would know all about that story. It can be controversial because in this particular book, it talks about how the enemy goes before God and asks if he can um, basically destroy the life of a Christian. And God gives the enemy the ability, not the ability, but the opportunity to do that. And there is lots of contentions, I believe, in things in the past, things in history, why God will allow certain things to happen. And if he's God, why doesn't he intervene in those things? But that is not what I'm talking about. That is much too heavy for what I want to share. And it is more of a victorious teaching and encouragement for you today. So the first chapter of Job in verses 6 all the way through till you get to chapter 2 is talking about how there were sons of God who presented themselves before God, and among that group, Satan was found. And so he also went before God, and of course, God knows everything and he's all knowing. So he says to Satan, are you here because of Job? Because you have your heart set on Job. And the reason why the enemy had his heart set on Job was because Job was blameless. It says in chapter 1, he was upright, he loved God, and he shunned evil, or he turned away from evil. And the enemy was suggesting to God that Job simply served God and believed in God and confessed to him being Yahweh because he had a good life. He had everything that he needed. And God says he didn't believe that was the case, and go ahead, do what you want to Job, just don't hurt his body. And then all these things happen. They happen in succession, one right after the other, tragedy after tragedy. And Job still doesn't curse God. And so the enemy comes again among a group of sons of God again. And he's found among a different group. And God says, where did you come from? And are you, considering Job again? And the enemy says, yes. The enemy believed that Job would curse God to his face. And so the enemy is given free reign over the life of Job, in fact, over his body. And things start to happen and cause him sickness. He gets boils and such. And he's very, very upset because his friends come to try to console him. And they know that he is in such sorrow and such pain that nobody speaks for a week. So if you want to read that, it's at the beginning of Job. But what I want to encourage people with is I feel like the more that the church is starting to change and the more that the fivefold ministry people are rising up and speaking truth and becoming bolder, the enemy is getting more anxious because he knows the time is near. He knows that he cannot win. He knows that he does not win. But yet he wants to stop other people from hearing the gospel and stop other people from being healed and being blessed and from knowing who God is. So, although people say that often, I heard that all growing up through church, the time is near, the enemy is stronger than he used to be, he's, we're in the final hour, all that type of stuff. But what I want to say is that through all of the things that Job went through, he ended up revealing the wisdom of God. He ended up uncovering a part of God that hadn't been seen in the past and isn't much discussed in the future. There were a lot of repeated verses about wisdom, a lot of people repeating what Job said or building off of what Job said. And it was in the moment of tragedy and sorrow, frustration, anxiety, all those things that people experience when they go through tragedy, that the wisdom of God is revealed to Job, and so revealed to him that it comes out of his mouth, because it says whatever's in your heart comes out of your mouth. It says that in the Bible. Um, and I just want to encourage those people that are facing things one right after the other. This is nothing new to my life. I have faced many things, and I'd say it back to back and overlapped and piled up. The enemy just tries to pile a bunch of stuff in front of you. And praise be to God, my faith has not wavered. And God has kept me in those moments. Yes, there have been down times and upsetting times and times where I needed to rest and pull away. I needed to make decisions that were healthy for myself, for my body, all that type of stuff. But what didn't change was in my heart, I knew God to be a God of wonder and a God of grace. And I believe that's what happened with Job, that everybody that exists on the planet is human. And so it would be unreasonable to expect people to not be human. And so I want to encourage you and tell you today, it's okay. It's okay to be upset if you're going through a hard time. It's okay to be frustrated if things aren't working in your favor. It's okay to feel like um, things are just not going the way you believe God has planned for your life. Because in prayer this past week, um, I just really felt that, yes, for me, but for other people, that it doesn't matter how many times the enemy goes before God and says, "Hey, have you considered, where God says to him, have you considered Charlotte, you're my servant who, is going to her job and all these things that are positive." I know that doesn't sound like it. I just don't want to ramble. But the enemy will consider, the enemy will seek out people who are wanting the word of the Lord to be established in the earth. He will seek you out. And he'll even go before God and say, "Hey, can I do this?" And it doesn't matter if God says, "Hey, yes, go ahead," because the enemy could come against you a million times. But what he will see from me is me praising the Lord, me worshiping the Lord, me standing on the firmest foundation, the rock Christ Jesus, the cornerstone. He will see me wrapped in robes of righteousness. He will see me shouting the praise of the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. He will see me bowed on my knees, continuing to pray, asking for God for things to intervene. He will see a righteous daughter. And I want to encourage you, it doesn't matter how many times the enemy goes before God and says, "Can this happen?" Or "Am I allowed to destroy some of these parts of these people's lives?" Let me tell you, it does not matter, because God has overcome the grave. Jesus has overcome the grave. We could go down in death, but Christ has overcome all of those things that concern us. And Christ can take care of all of those things that concern us. And Christ even has power over death. And I guess when I was in prayer, my faith just started to stir and my faith started to rise to believe that it doesn't matter, because the power of the enemy is not comparable to the power of the Lord. And what the enemy can take away doesn't compare to what God gives us. And in the New Testament, it talks about, these things that are troublesome, that in the light of God's glory, they fade, they're small. And although they don't seem small when we're facing them, like there are problems with finances, problems with housing that people have, problems with vehicles or finding vehicles, finding a home, paying for homes, sickness and health issues and death and disease that surround people. And yes, we are the children of God, but I want to encourage you that it does not matter if those things surround you. It doesn't matter how many times the enemy comes after you or comes at you with his accusations and with his words and with his weapons, because they cannot stand. They do not stand. We live as the sons and daughters of Christ. We will stand and we will worship. And the enemy may come in and say, "Oh, well, you're not going to make it and these things are going to happen. And he will see you worshiping the Lord. He will see the faith that is in your heart. He will see the love that is in your heart towards God and towards the people of God. So I just want to encourage you that God saves, God keeps, God holds. God is able to hold you in the middle of the storm. He feeds you in the presence of your enemies. And I just pray that you would be encouraged today, that it does not matter what the enemy says or the enemy does. Those things cannot keep us from God.